Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Do we have any public comment from the board?
Yes, I would like to thank all of the folks who helped out at the voluntary toll run by the Salvation Army on Saturday. It was a beautiful day. People were really very happy and very willing to give a hand. We raised over $5,000 for the Salvation Army. It was great, so thanks for everyone. I also wanted to mention, I attended a special meeting of the Lunenburg Water Department on Monday afternoon. The board is hard at work hammering out an IMA to present to Lancaster. They got one version from Lancaster, and they're making a lot of changes, and they're going to try to get it back to Lancaster. I really appreciated the transparency they are bringing to this process at this point, and they're willing to include observers in the conversation. We were able to engage and help them with things that they were hammering out in the IMA. It was a really nice spirit of cooperation. I also attended the school building committee meeting last Wednesday evening. I am disheartened, to say the least, to report that this group seems intent on spending every dime of the contingency. I appreciated Tom Alonso reminding the committee that the town voted to spend $36,484,451, not the $38,192,941 that their project funding amendment dated November 2015 shows. During the meeting, this group seemed to agree that the total amount should not exceed the $36 million voted at town meeting. However, they still have the opportunity to choose to not spend the entire contingency and reward the town for their trust in the process by allowing the total cost to be up to $2 million less than that. You know, they could spend $34 million. They don't have to spend the whole 36. At this meeting, we were informed that the MSBA will not cover items that were not included in the original proposal. So the list of add-ons they are now reviewing, total roughly $4 million, will not be eligible for any reimbursement from the state. They did vote to approve several items, including engineering for the possible inclusion of air conditioning of the classrooms, the placement of a 60-inch touchscreen for digital display of archived awards, and a site digital sign for $61,000. Items still to be considered that were not in the original proposal include a maintenance garage for $185,000 and other items I'd mentioned at earlier meetings. I was wondering, Carrie, do you have any word on the approval process for spending the contingency money?
I had a conference call with bond counsel today, and we're working on a legal opinion. He will provide a written legal opinion, and I have a conference call scheduled with the MSBA on Thursday to talk about the change order approval process, which I've mentioned to you before.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on that comment, as I said at one of our recent meetings, I truly believe that these types of meetings should be televised, and I would ask that we check with the school building committee to see if they would be willing to meet here so that the public can actually see the negotiations that are going on and what's being considered to be spent, because it is going to come from the taxpayers, and I think it's important that all of the pros and cons of that discussion be available to the taxpayers. I was saddened that I couldn't attend that meeting because I would have been vocal. I too am disheartened by the process. I think to include $61,000 for engineering especially for some of the items that Phyllis just talked about, such as the touchscreen for archived awards, is very concerning to me. They were not part of the original scope of the project, and I think we are now going beyond what the taxpayers entrusted us as a community to do. And I believe that these discussions need to take place, and I really am concerned about the selectmen's involvement in this process, because by signing that document to the MSBA, what is it that are we approving, or are we just certifying? What is our role? Because I am very concerned about the spending that is going on. Certainly, some of the items within the contingency money are exactly what they were supposed to be. They are contingencies, they are unforeseen circumstances that we couldn't have predicted. But some of the things that are on the quote wish list, I think are nice to haves, not need to haves, and I think we're going beyond the realm of the project.
Is there any public comment from the public? Okay, thank you. Our 7 o'clock agenda item is conflict of interest disclosure outline for the Conservation Commission members, Jack Rabbit, Carl Luck, Tom Bertram, and Mr. Kennedy. I'm sorry, I don't know his first name.
Mr. Chairman, I am going to recuse myself, as my son is one of the people seeking the exemption.
And I'm going to recuse myself, as my husband is another one of the members.
Mr. Chair, are you going to convene, or are we just, do you feel the need to convene a meeting, or are we just?
Well, we haven't advertised for a meeting.
Okay, fine.
So I believe you have all received the outline
Yep.
that you had asked. You're speaking for the group?
Yes.
Okay. So, do you have any questions? I'm basically here as the chairman of Richard Bursch, Lunenburg Conservation Commission Chairman, to answer any questions you may have on the outline. Basically what we did, we convened in a properly advertised meeting, and all the members voiced areas or ideas that they wanted to work on. And that's basically what we have here, is a listing of all the areas and ideas that we would be looking to work on as a group.
Okay.
At this point, what they would be looking for their exemptions for.
Are there any areas in particular that you believe require or don't require?
You know, in general, any policies or procedures or regulations or rules that would affect every person that comes in for an application, they really shouldn't need an exemption. You know, the biggest concerns I had initially were just asking for a broad exemption and not having a target or an idea of what we're working on. The outline that's here, I think, is well done. It covers pretty much everything that any of the members were looking to work on, and I don't personally have any issues with granting the exemption based on the outline that we have generated.
So there's two sections. One is the Conservation Commission regulations, and also the Conservation Commission bylaws, which would have to go to town meeting.
Correct.
So you're fine with all the members of the Conservation Commission discussing all these topics in both areas?
Personally, I have no issues whatsoever with any of the topics that we have outlined here in the outline.
Given the discussion we had originally, the couple that stood out to me were in the first section, in the regulations, potentially, and I'm not making a value judgment here, but the 10.5 buffer zones talks to defining titles, talking about a 30-foot language and a 50-foot language. And I think given the original discussions we had, whether members were considered to be personally impacted to the point where it could potentially be a conflict of interest. Can we talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, it looks like what you've done for description here, 30-foot update language to maintain existing property, and 50-foot define non-permitted structures and review what is allowed. It doesn't sound like it's saying we're going to change the 30-foot to 50 and the 50-foot to 100 or anything else like that.
Yeah, I believe the tenor of the group is to leave the buffers in place and just work on some of the general language, because we do get questions on, we already have a lawn in the 30-foot buffer zone, we already have some shrubbery, and the way it's written, there is to be no activity at all within that 30-foot buffer zone. So you do have to allow for just some general landscape and some general maintenance in that area that's already been developed. You know, an undeveloped land should remain undeveloped, but there are questions in that zone. What can we do to maintain what we have? So we're just looking to tighten that language up a little bit, so it's just not a general, no, you can't do anything at all ever. And the same with, we have a 50-foot no structure zone, but what is a structure? I mean, to say it, it sounds like it's an easy word to define.
Is a flagpole a structure?
Flagpole, a tent.
Right.
You know, there's 100,000 different things that can go in there. That, is it a structure? Is it not a structure? So looking to just tighten that language up as well. And those were the two areas that personally I had a little concern.
Right.
We should at least have a boundary of where we're working on.
And, I'm sorry.
No, okay.
And so what we're asking for here is permission to have that discussion. Now, if, as a result of that discussion, you come up with more definition, or is there a process for that to be reviewed either here or with, as a bylaw with town meeting, or?
You know, I would think if we got too far out of the outline that we have, we would certainly come back and have another discussion. Just, again, to keep the process open and in front of the townspeople so that they know what we're talking about. You know, when we get into the actual discussion of the regulation and the voting on it, we will definitely have a protracted time frame and set up hearings and proper notification. The way it's set up now, it's basically notify or have a public meeting, which is a 2-day notice with an agenda, which is not something we're going to repeat. We'll have an agenda, we'll have a public notification in the newspaper, on the television, the selectmen will notify the public, and then we'll do it over a number of hearings. It won't be just one, come in, talk, done. So it'll definitely be a protracted event.
And I would suggest when you get to that point that, not your regular meeting, but a special meeting on this, that if you can get it televised as well, that really people do watch, and it's a good way to get the information out, and everybody hears it the same way. So are you saying that at this point you don't believe that the description of what will be discussed constitutes a conflict?
Personally, no. I think with following within the realms of what we've set up as the outline, the discussions that need to happen, you know, it sets out what we're looking to do. You know, nobody's looking to get rid of the 30-foot or increase the 50 to 100.
Right.
You know, at least now we have a boundary, something that you guys can feel comfortable with us talking about.
Because I know that when I read this, it was like, okay, so where are the major issues? And so I think that having had the discussion about what you're going to be talking about, I think made me feel more comfortable about the fact that I would say that you wouldn't need one. And but it's certainly up to the members to see if they feel they need to ask for an exemption.
Yeah. Well, in the discussions, it wasn't, I recommended as a chair that we contact the Ethics Commission, which one of the 4 members had, and were told that they did need to file the disclosure with his explanation to the ethics attorney that was answered the call. So it is a process that was recommended. So we're just following out the process as it was recommended.
And I believe it's my understanding that that still is the case, and we would still have to vote to approve.
So you said recommended or required?
Required.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry.
All right. So I guess at this point, I would be interested in asking the members that are affected about what it's their intention to do.
Brad Kennedy. I'm one of the commissioner members. I was elected because I will talk less than a lot of the other members. Yeah. In fact, I asked the folks what I should say. I gave them a proposal and they cut it down. You've got a chance to review the places we want to make changes. There's nothing malicious in it. we're not trying to reduce or get rid of buffer zones or any of that. We're just trying to make this whole process a little bit more open. We've been having to deal with the regulations over the last, well, at least for me, it's been the last year, and they're not clear, and they leave a lot to be interpreted, and we'd like to have it less than that and make it easier for people that are coming in, right? The other thing is that outline covers a great deal of the rules and regulations. We're touching on almost everything in there, and you can see that through the regulations. And it'd be easier instead of limiting us to exactly what's in there, because we're going to talk about it all anyway. Having the limit saying we're only going to change what's in that list may be constraints that we'll have to decide, is this one that we need to go back again for, right? And we're not here to destroy what's been done before. We're just trying to make it better.
So I know that one thing we try to do on this board is try to have all the members present if possible, and Tom Alonso couldn't be here. And I am inclined to support a limited disclosure approval, but based on what's talked about here, about the general part here, but I would like to have him be here at this meeting if possible.
Yep.
Yes, I share that feeling, and we'll get ahead of myself a little bit here. We are not going to meet on the 22nd of December, so our next meeting is January 5th, and I won't be here that evening. So the 12th would be the earliest that three of us would be available to vote.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, is there any problem with waiting to that point to get the official?
At this point,
Okay.
I will not be able to attend on the 12th, but
Right.
I think I've answered what concerns and questions you've had.
I'm not sure that, I share Mr. Ebersol's feeling that in general I support this. I think where I would be, and it's not even a concern, where I would be interested is in those areas where the Lunenburg Conservation Committee differed from the state and was either more restrictive or different. I guess it can't be less restrictive, but those would be the areas where I'd want to understand why. And I think from hearing you, that would come out in hearings and, transparent discussions and television, et cetera. And I think that would satisfy my concerns.
Lunenburg bylaws are more restricted than the state, and less restrictive than some of the towns nearby, and more restrictive than some of the others. So there's variance between all of them. And the best person to help with that is to bring in our technical support guy, Matt Morrow, and he has all of that data because he's working with all the towns. We know pieces here and there, but I can't quote them.
No, and I'm not suggesting that we don't want to be more restrictive in certain areas. It may be to the benefit of our town, but I'd just like to understand why, and I think that'll come out through the process that you've discussed.
The other thing you should consider that a large percentage of our town is on water, and according to some numbers that have been thrown around, it's definitely more than 10% of the population. And according to the, I'll get it wrong every time. According to the conflict of interest definitions on the Mass website, there can be an exemption because if the volume of people in the town is over 10% that have the same level of interest that we do, then it shouldn't be considered a conflict of interest. The same financial interest. And I think we're dealing with taking care of the lake in front of lakes and rivers. And also the wetland is pretty significant. It's even bigger than the number of people on the lake. And we can get you hard data on that too. So that's another thing to consider in this whole process.
That is another thing that did come up, and I would be very interested in understanding exactly what those numbers were.
Yeah.
It would make me feel extremely comfortable to have both,
Yeah.
you know, a reading on that, on the statistics that show that
Right.
the conflict of interest exclusion doesn't apply, and also have a vote
Yeah.
from the selectmen that says, we understand that and we still support what you're trying to do.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can get you the numbers pretty quickly. I have a data collection analyst back there that has been supplying me some of the numbers. But the first order is like 13% of the town live on waterfront, and a significantly higher number is included with that is impacted by the wetlands rules and regulations. So it's a pretty high number.
If it wouldn't be too much trouble to get that to the selectman's office before the 12th, that would be helpful.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Might be easier to figure out the properties that are not affected by the,
Right.
this in town, because we do have a lot of water. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of water and the houses tend to group around the lakes.
Okay.
I just have one
go ahead.
comment. Tom Bertram, I'm on the Lunenburg Conservation Commission. I just want to clarify, I still would like to seek the initial exemption we already filed, which is the blanket exemption. Just because once we get into this, you can see we've talked about almost every section in the regulations, and I'm sure more things are going to come up. We want to clarify the process. We want to make it so it's more visible. You know, I'm open to having it be televised. But just so you know, when you do take a vote, I believe everybody else that, you know, the four of us, we're seeking the blanket exemption. I do have all those numbers. I have them here, so I can give them to you after this, so we can talk about it. I don't see any harm in you guys still giving us an exemption, just so we know we're clear. But I do have all that data, and I have this section, and it's labeled in. I was hoping not to go down that path. I was hoping this was going to be quick, and we just get the exemption and move forward.
The other question I'd have for the town managers is if we're provided with the data that shows that it's over 10%, can we make a finding of that or note it in the record and maybe determine that we don't have to do the exemption? I'm just looking at different options. I'd be willing to entertain the exemption, but I might be. One of the things I said is that you may have an exemption, but if during the process you have a personal situation where you actually have an actual conflict that goes beyond just general discussion, that you still would have to recuse yourself, and I think that's understood.
Well, yeah, if we were talking about, if I was filing a notice of intent or an RDA for my own property, I'd have to recuse myself.
Yeah.
But as far as the buffer zones, I guess that's the main thing we're talking about here, is the buffer zones.
Actually, I would see everything. Buffer zones are the hot topics, but I think anything that could potentially affect one thing or another is going to be something that we would need to deal with the conflict. Certainly, if we have the ability to have some data to do it, and we don't have to do that, and you're still covered, then we can have a finding of that part, but I'm not sure if that's allowed.
I can tell you just based on from the assessors, there's 3,564 homes. That's single family, double, and three-family homes. Of that, 472 are lakefront, and I've got those numbers from different people on the lake, so I'd have to verify them, which works out to 13.2% of the population just has lakefront homes. And that doesn't include wetlands or rivers or anything like that. So if you, in this section is advisory 05-02, voting on matters affecting a butter or nearby property.
Okay.
And it says right in it, if it's, the Ethics Commission has advised that at least 10% of the municipality's population is substantial segment for the purpose of the conflict of interest law. And it talks about the special exemption in that case.
Okay.
So I can,
So there may still be a requirement for a special exemption. If you can find out any rough estimate of other people that are affected by the wetlands as well, and that to bring that number up higher, that would certainly give us a greater comfort level.
that's going to be a little trickier because we'll have to look at the assessor's map. We can try to look into it,
Yep.
yeah.
I mean, even if you came up with some I don't know what's in the assessor database as far as, whether you have to manually look at each property and say how many feet from the wetlands that are on the map. And I don't know how many, even if it's just whatever standards, I think that would be helpful to me.
Okay.
So our recommendation then is to take this under advisement and actually vote on the 12th. We'll put it on the agenda on the 12th. I don't think there's a necessity for you to be here at that hearing. You're more than welcome, and I'd love to see you all here again. But we will take it up on the 12th for a vote. And the more data we have on this other issue between now and then, the better it's going to make us feel.
Okay.
All right? Any other questions or comments?
The only other comment I'd like to make is that because we have so many wetlands and so many lakes and everything else like that, I would not want to have a conservation commission without people that are affected by those. So I think that's a vital resource. I mean, not to say that people that aren't on a lake or water don't care about the environment either, but I think that we need to have that blend.
I knew you could. I couldn't resist.
I will be certainly shorter than the guy that told me I was too long-winded. Just some other 2 points of data. We actually have a 5th member who is affected by this. So 5 of the 7 members are affected by either living on a lake or abutting a wetland. And from the data that I've heard, there was a study done a few years back when we were building the town barn. The actual wetlands area runs between 26 and 28% of the town. We're living in a big island, really. So it's not surprising that you'd have so many members who are committed to protecting that environment on this committee, who are very knowledgeable about this particular piece. But as a general population, it's, we're talking probably something in that same statistical realm between, the 13% that are directly on a lake and the rest that are surrounded, that are living on that 26 to 28% of the land. So it's a big issue for this town, and we appreciate your help in this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
See, and I was shorter than Brad.
Okay, and thank you very much. And I would also like to reiterate what Mr. Ebersol said. I mean, I don't want this to come across in any way that we are not looking favorably on the fact that there's so much interest in conservation from people that live in the wetlands and near the lakes. I think that's an excellent asset that the town has. Thank you very much for your service. Okay.
I know enough people coming for this, and they're not here.
Okay. We have maybe we do? Okay. Should I check, or do you know?
Yeah.
Thank you. Our 7:30 appointment is for a toll booth fundraiser request from Twin City Paws. Is somebody here from? And I'm sure I'm going to get grief for my pronunciation of the word pause. Please.
Hi. I'm with Twin City Paws, and we're an organization that helps fund animals in need. So we do rabies clinics, microchipping. We do 4 pet food pantries. We have one here in Lunenburg at the Senior Center. Excuse me, I just ran the stairs. What else? We have educational programs, and we work with therapy pets. So right now, we're trying to get a little kickoff for next year, and we work with feral animals, Pat Brody Shelter, Fitchburg Friends of Felines, local animal shelters, so we're pretty much everywhere. So I'm not quite sure what you want to know.
And you're looking to do a fundraiser on
On Saturday.
Saturday, December 19th. And where will you be? You'll be in the center of town?
Right out here is where we want it to be, Main Street and Mass Ave.
Fine. And you've checked with the police department, you understand?
We stopped in and visited with them and told them we'd let them know what happened here, and then we stopped and got the approval with DPW to get cones.
Okay. And that the people that are conducting the
toll?
The toll will have vests on, and they'll all
Yes.
be of age and that type of thing,
We'll
right?
all be 18 or over. We'll
Great.
have bright clothes and ears.
Years, okay, great.
What time period are you going to do it?
We were looking to go from 10 to 2, I believe. I mean, weather permitted, of course.
Okay.
I would make a motion that we approve the request by Twin City Paws to do a toll booth fundraiser in the center of town on December 19th from 10 to 2 with a snow date of December 20th.
Second.
Okay, the only discussion I have is, do we have a problem with, although nobody's anticipating snow, do we have a problem with doing it on a Sunday if there's inclement weather?
As long as it's, I would say as long as it was the streets were cleared enough at
Right.
that point.
Okay,
And we'd be willing to postpone it to a later date. We just don't want to do it so close to Christmas with the following week.
right,
So,
right. Okay, well, let's assume that the weather's going to be fine.
yeah, it looked pretty good.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank
Okay,
you.
good luck.
Thank you.
Well, good luck to that.
Thank you.
Okay. Alrighty, our first current business is license renewals. A continuation of our discussion last week for a couple that were in front of us.
Okay, so we have 3 corrections. I will take those up first. You should have, I believe you have a memo from Elaine that identifies, so she needed to make corrections on the licenses for Hannaford Food and Pharmacy, number 8388, incorrectly listed as Hannaford Food and Drug. A correction for Settlers Pub on the Sunday hours. They were listed at noon, and they're actually at 10 a.m., and an incorrect address for Lanny Orchards. So I don't think that you need to revote them. They just, the license needs to be re-signed to correct the information. So I'm going to pass those down. Now you have a couple of new ones up for approval this evening. The first is Conrad's Drive-In Incorporated, doing business as Conrad's Drive-In, a license for common victualler.
I would move that we approve Conrad's Drive-In Common Victualler license.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, not.
Okay, the second is for Premium Motors for a Class 2 auto dealer license. And the reason these were held is the paperwork wasn't 100% in order in time for last week's meeting, and it now is. So this is a request to renew Class 2 auto dealer license for Premium Motors.
I would make a motion that we approve the Class 2 auto dealer license for Premium Motors.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and the third and final is a request for a renewal of a Class 2 auto dealer license, and I just want to point out one difference, and you have something in your packet. The applicant has been doing business at 40 Summer Street as Import Domestic Auto Sales for the past several years. The name of the corporation that owned Import Domestic Auto Sales was Double Down Sales Incorporated. There were 2 partners Scott Sanford and Matthew Glennie. Mr. Glennie has taken a full-time position and is no longer involved in the business. Mr. Sanford is requesting that the Class 2 auto dealer's license be changed into the main corporation, which is Import Domestic Auto Sales, and then doing business as Nutting's Body and Frame Company. So the same business, same corporation, a different DBA.
So they would be subject to, does this require any changes of approval by any other boards? It's not a ZBA thing. Change of ownership is just allowed automatically, right?
Right, and it's the same corporation,
Okay.
just a different DBA, so I'm not even sure if that technically qualifies as a change in ownership.
I would move that we approve the Class 2 auto dealer for Import Domestic Auto Sales.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Take on the licenses?
Yes.
All right. Okay, our next item is the Worcester County Selectmen's Association membership. And I believe we are looking for a voting member and an alternative voting member, is that correct?
Yes, this is an organization that we just became part of this year. We attempted to find some additional information about it, and we were unsuccessful. So I think you had been provided a copy of the application, or at least the second page of the application that has some information on the organization. So this is a group of members of boards of selectmen of communities within Worcester County. The group meets 4 times a year. They have a lot of roundtable discussions. They invite in speakers. In the past, they've had the sheriff in, the district attorney, former Lieutenant Governor Tim Murray, who currently is with the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce. And so they've had different speakers in. It's a group would provide you an opportunity to talk to some of your colleagues in other communities and share information. And so I think it's very beneficial. I believe the membership fee is $50, so it's very low cost. But they are asking that we identify a member and an alternate for their records.
Well, they only meet 4 times a year, and it's on a Thursday evening, so I'd be willing to go to the meetings if
I would as
that
well.
pleased the
And so would
board.
I, so.
Okay. I actually stumbled into one of their meetings last year. I don't know how I did that.
Stumbled?
Well, I didn't, I guess we weren't a member, but I attended their meeting, and the only thing I thought it was a very good group, and I believe in groups like that, sharing information. I would suggest, though, that it tends to be well represented of the southern part of Worcester County, and in fact, their equivalent of the planning group is the other one. It's the one that
okay.
operates out of Worcester.
Worcester, right.
Yeah. So there's not a 100% overlap with what we're familiar with, but I think that's a good thing.
Mhm, right.
So I totally support us being a member.
And you always learn something when you go to those meetings,
Right.
and it makes you more aware of what's happening in the
So who wants to
County.
be the voting member and who wants to be the alternate voting member?
So I think we heard Phyllis would like to be the voting member, and Jamie, you said that you would be the alternate?
Sure.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And certainly, if there's a topic that any of you want to do, I won't go.
Yeah.
Whatever. All righty. Do we have any minutes?
I don't know if somebody.
Is there any minutes in the?
No, there aren't.
There aren't, okay. Warrants?
We do. This is payroll.
Payroll for $715,747.96. Payroll deduction for $426,496.73.
School construction.
And school construction for $2,734,937.29. And accounts payable for $237,105.54. Are there any action file issues? Okay. Committee reports. Mr. Ebersol?
The only thing I have to report is last night the Board of Health held another workshop on their septic loan program. In talking with Andrea last week, their goal was to try to get something done by the end of the year. I was unable to attend, but they're still working on it.
Ms. Bertram?
The planning board met last night. There were two hearings of interest. The 274 Prospect Street hearing was continued again. Revised plans came in late in the Thursday, so they have continued that to the second meeting in January, which is the 25th at 6:35. The other hearing that generated a lot of interest was 357 Electric Avenue. This is the Unitil project, which is the distribution and operations center. There was a presentation by Unitil as well as the architect. There were several abutters there that expressed concerns with the transformers, some of the drainage on the site, and potential contaminants. I also, as a citizen, mentioned some of my concerns. There's poles, treated and untreated poles are going to be stored, as well as cold patch, clean fill, spoils, transformers that are going to be stored on the property. So the drainage to the wetlands, the property is basically surrounded by wetlands, and although the water flow is across towards the front of the roadway, there is some concern about, and some of the planning board members expressed the same concerns, that some of that runoff is going to go eventually back into the wetlands. So one of the things that did come up about that hearing is that several members expressed concern with the transformers right now are not proposed to have any kind of covering on them, and there's a reactive system that's proposed, which is that if in the case of a leak and if it were detected, then there's a 2,000-gallon tank proposed to catch any of that runoff, and there's a berm around that storage area. But a couple of the members expressed concern that that's a reactive system rather than a proactive system. Somebody would actually have to physically see leaking transformers in order to turn the tank on. So the applicant is going to provide more information, and that hearing will be held again on, let me just, it was continued to, there's a lot of notes. It was continued also to January 11th, which apparently will be a very long meeting, according to the planning director.
Now, do they address stormwater issues?
That also came up, whether or not a NIPD's permit is required, but yes, I mean, there are stormwater. According to the engineer, there's a net loss of stormwater. There's not an increase of stormwater off of the site than pre-existed. And in fact, there's a 1.2 acre deduction of impervious material, although that was up for debate, because one of the points that was raised by one of the members is that although, yes, at one point the whole drive-in was paved, because of the amount of years that have gone on, there's a lot of vegetation coming up through the pavement, and it's cracked and broken. So whether or not this should be considered a reconstruction project versus new development was also on the table. But according to the engineer, the flow is not, the stormwater flow will not increase from the site, and in fact, the impervious area is decreasing. So
that's good news.
And conservation meets tomorrow night.
Mrs. Luck?
Finance committee invited the school committee to participate in a workshop last Thursday to informally open talks for the budget season, which is now upon us. The discussion was a good start. Town Manager LaFleur was in attendance. She was also at the school building committee meeting. She has a lot of late nights. The school committee meets tomorrow night. The superintendent will present the Flat Collaborative Annual Report, and I read the report today, and I was a little confused because I thought I heard at a meeting that FLAC was going to leave the Passio School, and we're not going to continue. And then in the report, it mentions, it states that they were also in ongoing conversations with the town of Lunenburg Building Reuse Committee regarding the use of the Passios that currently houses our Caldwell Elementary program. That program has an agreement with the Lunenburg Public Schools to remain in the Passios through the end of June 2016, but they will begin looking for a new location if the town cannot extend the agreement. So at the meeting the other day, it sounded like they were leaving, and this report makes it sound like it's the ball's in our court. So
I can give you an update on that. I can give you an update on that.
Okay, great. And I wasn't able to attend the ZBA meeting because I was at the school building committee meeting, but Lisa Normandin gave me an update. They met on the 9th. Applicant Jill Normandin appeared to request a use permit for the rear building at the former Sky Cycle site, which is kind of across from Ugly Omelet. This request is to have an auto repair facility, and it was a motorcycle repair shop many years ago. And the request was approved unanimously. But on another matter, I had a conversation with Lisa Normandin about that 131 Elm Street project, and she said the applicant, who had received approval, has decided instead of the 84 ground-mounted solar panels, he's going to put a roof-mounted panels and just have several ground-mounted panels, so he doesn't need to use that special permit.
Okay.
So that's it.
Okay, the Building Reuse Committee will meet on the 21st of this month and review our final recommendations. The question that Mrs. Luck brought up was there is a proposal for the Passios that is one of the several options we're looking at, and based on the timing of that, we said that we would the FLAC people are expecting to move out. They were asked by the school committee to find another place to run FLAC, but what we said we'd do is we'd consider if there was a timing issue on when the next step on the Passios came to play, we would consider, is there a way for them to use that as an option? It'll all be decided in the next week or two, whether there's a window even to have that discussion, and that must be what they were referring to. But their official point right now was a notification from the school that that building would be not used and subject to reuse, and therefore not available to FLAC. What we said we'd do, because they came and spoke to us, is we said that once we make our recommendations to this body and to the town, if there were any time considerations that we could allow them to use the building while some other steps fell into place, we would consider that, and that must be what
So
they were
now
referring
they're in there through the next school year?
They're planning to be there through the end of this current school year.
Oh, okay, just.
Right, whenever the
June of 16.
Yeah, June, whenever the school moves out into their new property, that would be the end of their agreement with the town as well. Now, to go back to building reuse, our plan is to have this meeting on the 21st, look at the final recommendations, vote on those recommendations, and prepare a presentation to this body, the Board of Selectmen, and talk to us here about next steps, town meeting, financing, some of those other next steps that would be part of the process, and whether that group continues or whether we reconfigure that group as more of an implementation team or some other skill set that would go forward. Capital Planning will start their meetings on the 29th of this month, and we'll meet with the various requesters for capital for this year's coming budget and report to the Finance Committee on the 28th of January.
Does capital planning have any opinion on the contingency capital items?
Not really. I mean, it's part of our 15-year plan. You know, that was the various items that are being considered as potential uses of contingency are also proposals for capital money if they didn't come out of contingency, so they're part of the discussions. But we don't have a role in the use of the actual contingency fund. We have a role in requests from various town departments and groups about what they need for capital, and then we need to prioritize that and present it to the FinCom and the town manager to see where it fits in the budget. And I would assume that means the operating budget, the capital budget, and potentially any contingency money that would be appropriate. But that's not the role. I don't see that as the role of the Capital Planning Committee. Does that answer?
Yeah, it does, but it seems like it's a missing link because it's big money.
Well, the Capital Planning Group for the first time has asked people to take a 15-year look, and what we're hoping to do is provide the FinCom with a much bigger picture of what the capital needs are over the 15
That's great.
years.
I think that's great.
How to finance that, I mean, the equation out of the gate is unsolvable because it's big numbers over 15, 20 years. But then, you know, obviously you begin to look at certain of those and prioritize them and say, what can we afford, what can we never afford, and what can we afford if we do it in a certain sequence.
It would be interesting when we have these discussions about the school contingency funds, what else is on the horizon for capital needs? I know there's been talk about the capital needs for Turkey Hill Middle School, and understanding that cost when we look at spending contingency, and this is one of my concerns as a taxpayer, is when we look at spending contingency funds for the school building project, knowing that we have other very large ticket items on the horizon that aren't nice to haves, that they're required to haves. You know, the resources are not limitless, and that money has to come from somewhere. So when we have these discussions about what's needed versus what's nice to have, I think understanding what is in that 15-year picture is important.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any town manager reports?
At your meeting last week, you approved a license agreement for 1134 Northfield Road. At the time, Town Council had not yet drafted up the license agreement. I have the license agreement here for you to review. The one item that was mentioned was to make sure that there was proper indemnification in the agreement so that the town would be protected. That is included, so I have it here. If people are comfortable signing it this evening because you did authorize it, please do so. If you'd like to put it off until the next meeting, or if there are any questions, that's fine as well. So I will pass that down. We did not send it out to you in advance because we just received it this afternoon. So I understand if people want to hold off on that. The second thing I wanted to mention is at the Finance Committee meeting last week, there was a request to schedule a workshop to dig into Chapter 70 funding, school funding for, well, Paula, for those of you on the board, maybe 4 years ago, we had somebody come in, I'm not sure if you remember, he came in and did a workshop, maybe it was an hour and a half, and it was a real detailed look at how education funding works within Massachusetts generally, and then we looked at the specific funding formula for the town of Lunenburg. So the Finance Committee asked if I would schedule that, and we're looking to do something probably at the very beginning of February, possibly the end of January, just prior to when we start the budget review process. We would be bringing in the same consultant that we worked with before. He does this across the state. He seemed to be very well received when we did this a few years ago. So I just wanted to let you know about that, and I'm working on scheduling it. And that's it for me.
Okay. Okay, we're going to ratify appointments of Ryan Clark and Joseph Poirier Jr. to the position of DPW laborer.
We have, well, we currently have 3 openings in DPW. I believe that I've mentioned to you before that we've had kind of a tough time finding candidates to fill our laborer, equipment operator positions within the town, and I had mentioned that one thing that maybe we need to consider is the salary that we're offering. We've had been running advertisements for 2 of these positions for probably 6 months, maybe even a little bit longer than that. But we actually were able to identify 2 candidates that I'm really very pleased with. I had the opportunity to meet both of these individuals about a week or so ago. They have interviewed a couple of times at DPW. They've been tested on the equipment, and they're really two very unique individuals. One of them has some pretty significant experience. Mr. Clark has some pretty significant experience working with heavy equipment. He most recently is employed with Keating's. We tend to lose employees to Keating, so actually, no, he's not with Keating, he's with Powell. I'm sorry. We lose people to Powell, too, and with all due respect to the 2 Mr. Powells in town, I'm happy that we're able to hire this young man. The second individual, Joseph Poirier Jr., has, for as young as he is, quite a bit of experience working on a seasonal basis for the city of Leominster and their parks department. He has a little bit less experience on the heavy equipment, but he does have a commercial driver's license. So this is the first time in years that we've been able to hire people who actually have commercial driver's licenses, and I'm just really pleased that we were able to hire these 2 individuals, and I'm requesting ratification of their appointment this evening.
I would make a motion to ratify the appointment of Ryan M. Clark and Joseph Poirier Jr. to the position of DPW labor equipment operator.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And then
Lose.
finally, we have a resignation from the Cultural Committee, Kirja Pananen, who will be resigning effective December 1st. And I'd like to ask us to accept that and thank her for her service.
So moved?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All righty. We will not have a meeting on December 22nd, so the next meeting of the Board of Selectmen will be January 5th. Is there any public comment from the public? Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dave Rogers, 82 Highland Street. First, I want to thank the town manager for the great job that she and her staff did with the projections of the financial picture for the town for the next 5 years. I know that it's a lot of work, and it was very well done, as always, so thank you. I will look forward, as I'm sure everybody will, to learning how we'll be addressing these deficits as time goes on. Which brings me to my next question, and that is regarding the contingency fund, or the contingency account for the school building project. I wondered if you would be kind enough to share with me what your understanding of that account is and the uses for same.
Sure.
Since I've had the opportunity to speak with bond counsel, the contingency fund is available to be used to outfit or furnish or provide. I think he was over here earlier. Or to provide for the use of the school building. So anything inside the building that may or may not have been contemplated but is needed for the operation of the building, you could use the contingency fund for. Some of the items that have come up in are on a list are for things that are outside of the building but on the school campus. And bond counsel has asked for a description of what each of those items are, how they will be used, and if something needed to be moved because of the construction, so a field, for example, if a field had to be relocated because of the construction of the new building, even if it wasn't contemplated in the original project, that potentially the cost of the field, relocation of the field could be included. But for things, so he's asked for that description, and we will provide that to him within the next week or so, and he said he will provide a written legal opinion as to what on that list is either inside the scope or outside of the scope in plenty of time for the next school building committee meeting. So I think a lot of these things that, based on the initial conversation I've had, a lot of the big ticket items that I think people are concerned about really seem to be outside of the scope based on the conversation that I had with bond counsel. So before people really start losing sleep over this, I just ask that we wait to receive the legal opinion, because I think that will clarify a lot.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ms.
I
Bertrand.
don't mean to interrupt, Dave, but that just raises a point in my mind as to the $61,000 that was just approved and voted on for engineering of some of the items related to the contingency. And I think I just heard you say that if it's related to the operation of the school, and one of the things that the engineering was just approved on, and Phyllis, correct me if I'm wrong, is I thought I heard it's a touch screen system to allow for award archiving. Certainly, while that's a great technology, I don't know that that's needed for the operation of the school. Now, I don't know what the price tag is for that engineering, and if we have an opinion, a written opinion coming from bond counsel, I would ask that the school building committee be asked to hold off on spending any of the engineering money until we receive that written opinion. Because it's my understanding that the vote has already been taken to go forward with engineering on some of these contingency items.
I couldn't agree more, and let me tell you,
It's not really there.
yeah, right, Bob.
It is, because he was over here.
Yeah. That is part and parcel of my concern. And I'm sure that I will get all kinds of flack about this, which is fine. But I hardly think that mirrors in the weight room fall in a category as necessary. I hardly think that the machine that you talked about, although nice, is in the same category, as is the sign. My concern is this. We're facing 5 years of deficits. And just because we have $3+ million doesn't mean that we can spend it. Because I don't know about you, but I will tell you, I thought that a contingency fund was used, or could be used, should be used, for something that is an oops. If you have an overage, like with the plumbing, that was excluded, okay? So, although I disagree with that, because I think that's something that was forgotten or overlooked by the architect, I'll go along with something like that. And I guess if the air conditioning was important, why wasn't as part of the initial scope?
Right.
Okay? And what really, really upsets me, because you hear this time and time again about the transparency. I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know about the list that they have. I haven't been brought forth any kind of discussion about this. But when we started the whole process with the school, we were. Everybody had an input, and it was right up there. And now, all of a sudden, this seems to have gone away, which really concerns me. So I would respectfully request that this board send a letter to the school committee as well as the school building committee and ask them respectfully to withhold making any commitments relative to the contingency fund until it can be transparent and people can understand what the use is. Now, the caveat here, insofar as I'm concerned, is just because we have it doesn't mean that we should spend it. Now, you all, it's like preaching to the choir here, but you all understand that we've taken the financing out on increments, so we don't have a gun to our head, and they can't say, well, we've already committed to it, because we haven't. And, $3+ million, we fight over $50,000. So $3.5 million plus, I think, is a large sum, and I think that we should be very, very careful how we spend that. And I appreciate your time, and I want for the record, please, to indicate that on the 15th of December, in the year of our Lord, 2015, Dave Rogers, Mrs. Luck, and Mrs. Bertram agreed on something. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to you and your family, and I thank you for the opportunity.
I wanted to mention that I preached that same to the school building committee because I was at the meeting this week.
I want to just follow up and say I couldn't agree more, and I hope that we do send something over, especially in light of the fact that we're getting a written opinion from bond counsel that they hold off on moving forward with anything. And additionally, as I said a couple weeks ago, I think this board needs to have a meeting with the school building committee so that we can talk about these types of issues. And I could not say more strongly that I think the school building committees need to be open and transparent, and they need to be publicized.
And their meetings, their original school building committee meetings used to be televised, so at some point they moved to the school. So
I'd be remiss if I didn't also add that I think that they're doing a good job overall. They're fine people. They're well-intended. And this is just something that as a community we need to come together, discuss, and we'll work the thing out.
Agreed.
Okay, thanks.
Is there any public comment from the board?
I guess just a follow-up comment is that when we look at the future years, and nobody has talked about an override or a debt exclusion at this point during this year's budget process, but I think it's important that the school contingency process be in a way that everybody understands, because we built up a lot of trust with people. We got people to vote for the school by a substantial margin, and I don't want to lose that goodwill for anything that might be coming down the pike later.
Couldn't agree more.
Nor could I. So I guess the question is although this isn't an item on our agenda, can we ask that a memo be sent to the school building committee highlighting our concerns and letting them know that an opinion is coming from bond counsel and to hold off on moving forward with anything?
Well, if I could just mention, they're aware an opinion is coming because they requested the opinion.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's important, and while as a citizen, I share all the concerns that we mentioned tonight. I think it's important to be on the record to say that the school committee is a separately elected board. I totally agree that it should be way more transparent than it is. I think that the school building committee should take our recommendation to begin to televise their meetings, but that is the forum to have those discussions. Over and above that, I think that we as a Board of Selectmen need to understand our role in approving any of this and making it public, and I certainly support that. I feel uncomfortable sending them a letter telling them to do anything, but I would like to invite them to a joint workshop where we can discuss this and figure out the best way for us to work together for the good of the town.
I don't think we need to send a memo, but I think that Carrie has already conveyed some discussions with, has been in discussion with the superintendent and other things like that. I think it'd be good to have a verbal part. It may be water over the dam for the items they voted last night because they had a certain amount of time that they had to deal with certain engineering, but if it comes back that bond council says they can't spend that money, they're going to have to find the money someplace else, and whether that's out of the school budget, that's going to have to be a concern on that. I think it is our duty as the chief elected officials in this community to express opinions to other elected boards. I think that is our duty. The format that we do it, I would welcome that workshop, but I think that I would hold off until we hear the bond council opinion, but I think that most of them would have been listening to us tonight as well, if not later, and certainly the reporting from the Sentinel and the Ledger would be getting the message to them as well.
Right.
I agree. The other thing I'd like to just say is that I do echo the feelings that the town manager and her staff has done an excellent job on preparing for the budget, but I also want to be real clear that the report of deficits over the next 5 years is just against a projection, and we are not going to have deficits. That's an assessment of our current look at revenue versus expenses, and we work very hard during the budgeting process to make sure we have a balanced budget as we move forward.
Carrie, do you know when you'll get that information from bond council?
Well, I gave him the timetable of when the next school building committee meeting was going to occur.
So when is that? Do you know?
The beginning of January. I mentioned the beginning of January to him. So he's requested that we provide him information, which, assuming we do that by the end of this week, he said he would have a written opinion well before that next meeting. It didn't seem like it was going to take him long to do that, I would imagine, even before the holiday.
And the other question that's out there is the role that the Board of Selectmen play in this process. We do sign on the paperwork that goes to the MSBA, but what that signature is still in question. Is it just simply a certification of where the money is being spent? Is it some type of approval? What is that? And if we could get, I know there was a verbal opinion relayed at one of the school building committees, but I don't know whether bond council or whether we could get an opinion from MSBA in writing as to what our role is in this process.
I have a conference call scheduled on Thursday with the MSBA to start working on that issue. I would like to get something in writing from them as well, because it is confusing to me, and I just want to make sure we're doing the right thing.
I'm just thinking, if it's funds that like any funds that we're spending now that weren't part of the initial proposal, the MSBA is having no part of. So if we're spending funds that the MSBA is not contributing to, will they have an opinion on how we do the approval?
They absolutely will.
Okay.
They will, because it's a project. It's our project, that Lunenburg and the MSBA's project, and so they have a role in the entire project.
Okay, great.
And just to be clear, I totally support that. I would like the Board of Selectmen to be very clear on what our role is in the
Right.
approval process. I agree wholeheartedly with my colleagues on that. Any other comments, closing comments? Okay, we will meet then for the next time on the 5th of January. I'd like to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a safe travel during the holiday season. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Good night, everybody.